Hey there, No Labels, No Limits podcast listeners. Sarah Box, your host, and this week we have another great guest, Joanne French. Let me tell you a little bit about Joanne. She is a content strategist and marketing consultant. She has over 25 years of business experience. She is both a dynamic speaker and an engaging workshop facilitator who strongly believes that people learn through play and fun. You're going to hear that because she laughs a lot in our conversation and she's just so genuine. And she feels that when we get to play as adults, that's when our next big idea and innovation actually cuts loose. She also talks about the difference between branding and a personal brand or your brand. Oftentimes those things are confused with one another. And what I found really interesting was her focus on helping people write more effective LinkedIn bios or social media bios that are less of a laundry list about our history and our past and more about the story that tell people who we are genuinely and why that matters to the world and potentially to them. So enjoy the podcast. I really loved my time with Joanne, and I'm certain you will too. Let's get started. Welcome, Joanne. I'm so happy to have you on this week's podcast. I'm wondering, before we start talking about you and your journey and your business, if you could tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself, where you are, and what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Hey, everybody. This is Joanne French. I own a business called Inabuse, and it's a content marketing solutions company. I love to write and do nerdy stuff like write white papers and so forth and do research. My career has been in market research, so I'm constantly a curious person. And I felt like there's a big need for B2B companies and professional services companies to get their credibility and showcase their proof points through their content. So it's a new business. I've done it throughout my career, but now I'm putting it into practice. I just recently remodeled and restructured my offering. My website's getting redone, and I made a lot of mistakes starting the way, even as a marketer, which just makes you want to scream that some of the advice that I give to my clients, I didn't take myself. But it's all good. You just got to learn and move on. And that's where I'm at right now with my business. I've made some really great connections and collaborations, and I'm just happy to be doing what I'm doing right now. And I'm just so grateful for everyone that's kind of helped me along the way. And I'm really excited about getting rid of all the junk that was in my business and now just have a clear direction and focus moving forward. So I could tell you about that, Sarah.
I think we will talk a little bit about that because I know that clarity and focus is a big concern for folks I work with and hear from. It's like, how do you know when you've got, and I will use these very formal words, too much junk going on, right? So you don't have the clarity or the focus, you're pulled in different directions. So from two different perspectives, Joanne, one from your history as a research strategist, content person, but also as a new business person. How have you navigated when you stood back and looked kind of at the advice you did not take from yourself? How have you navigated to get more clear and specific on your new offerings now? What was that process like for you?
Well, so I also have a podcast, and my podcast has turned into my own personal coaching session. I don't tell my guests that are on there that, but I seek out guests that have advice to share, I guess, similar to you. And what I've learned from my guests is that one, you have to continually network. And I found some really great women's business groups in my area that I belong to and have given me that lift and that confidence, and people that I could talk to that are doing the same things and might be struggling and offer, my advice and take their advice. And I realized from one of my last shows that it was funny. She's like, my business began to succeed when I started saying yes. And this woman was a mother of 3 small children. And she's like, if somebody just held the baby, that was a yes, or someone offered to go grocery shopping for her, that's a yes. And I'm like, damn, I'm not saying yes. Like, it's like, because a lot of in the corporate world, you're like, try to say no so you could have a work-life balance, try not to take everything on your desk and then not be able to do anything. So you kind of have that no, like, yeah, you have that yes, and you're like, crap just keeps piling on your desk until one day you're like, no, I can't do it anymore. So that no has kind of stuck with me. But now I'm like, yes, if you want to help me, yes. I found 2 people to help me with my website. They're doing it out of their own kind hearts. And they basically told me I had to break up with my website. They're like, you're in a bad relationship with your website. Just stop it. Just, you have to break up with them at your website, just move on and we'll help you. And I broke up with my provider. I was in a bad relationship with my website. And I write copy for websites, but I don't do like the skeletal stuff. I work with consultants and stuff like that. But the person that I hired just over-engineered it so much that I couldn't do anything with it. I couldn't even like post anything. So I got out of that bad relationship with my website, and I said yes. Normally I'd be like, no, I can handle it. I can do it. And recently too, it's funny. I did some consulting work for free for someone. They're like, oh, hey, let me give you a free coaching session. I'm like, yes, I'll do it. So, and honestly, that's been really changing my attitude and perspective and my mindset about things, because I really needed to reset my mindset in a bad way. Like, it was kind of like, when you're in a hole, sometimes you don't even realize you're in the hole until somebody offers you a hand to get out of it. So that's how I felt. Like I went to into a rabbit hole, and I was still like wandering around, like searching for the carrot. And someone was like, "Hey, here's the damn carrot," like, just grab it. It's right here. Say yes to the carrot. It's just so funny how silly some of the silly things that you do when you're in a business and think that you have to do it all yourself, and afraid to outsource or afraid to say yes, and so forth. So I learned that lesson from one of my guests on a podcast, which is my therapy session. But don't tell my.
That's hilarious. But that's so true, right? And there is that push-pull love relationship with yes, no. So there's the no because it's not, and I practice no a lot for no, it's not taking me where I need to go. But I think, and especially for women I work with, saying yes to offers of help is harder, right? Because you said this, it's like, no, I can do it. It's like, yes, but the rest of that question is, should you do it? Isn't there someone who could do it better, faster, easier? And they actually would have some fun doing it, right? Because that's their stuff. So that's so hilarious and so true. So one of the things that I think is amazing is, you've got this background of writing content and doing that for other people. Did you find when it was time to think about describing yourself and writing content for yourself in your new business, did that come easily to you, or did you have a different shift when you had to turn inward?
Well, so when I worked in corporate America, it was always easier because it wasn't me, it was the corporation. I was always doing, stuff behind a corporate logo. So one of the hard things that I found when I first started my business was that, well, damn, why didn't I create my personal brand even when I was in corporate America? And coming out of, I still, like, when I started my company, I was like, oh, here's my brand, my logo, and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't really step out of it for a while. And I'm just starting to step out and create my personal brand more. And that was a scary thing, to just like feel like, hey, no, this is, even though, this is Joanne, this isn't, some big, corporation with 1,000, 6,000, however many people bringing in $1 billion a year. I'm just like, just one person starting out on herself, and being an entrepreneur, I guess you could say, it was a little daunting to like put my face on everything, because I just slapped the logo on it and walked away. And like, and I spent a lot of my career ghostwriting everything, because I mean, as a writer, a lot of people, you just like, here, give it to me. Let me just fix that for you. And you just, and then you end up ghostwriting everyone's blog and white paper and stuff like that, and webinar and stuff like that. So and that was fine for me too, because I just wanted to see the company shine and the people I worked with shine. But that personal branding thing, I wish I started, earlier in my career. But when you work in a corporation, it's like we. It's not me. And there's got to be that balance of both. And anyone who's listening, it's kind of like, I did get divorced after 20 years in marriage. And when I got divorced, I'm like, why did I do a push-up or a sit-up, in those 20 years? Now I'm single. I got to lose weight. I have to get into shape. God, for Christ's sake, someone might see me naked. So it's kind of like that. I know I'm a little crazy, but
that's fine.
It's like, well, damn it. Why didn't I just put my face out there, like long ago, instead of like, instead of hiding behind, the corporate.
I think that's a really interesting point, though, because I know and that was similar for me. It's like, okay, and someone says, no, you have to have I don't want my picture out there. Can't we come up with like a little symbol? Sure, but that's not who you are, and people are going to be working with you,
Yes.
Okay. But can you just spend a minute or two and distinguish for folks the difference between a logo and a personal brand? Because I think I hear it get lumped together like my brand or our brand, whatever, and they're not, or my understanding is they're not the same thing. Your branding versus your brand.
Right. I think, you still can have obviously you can have a logo for your company and a website, and you're going to have branding, which is your colors, your tone, your feel, and everything like that. But a personal brand is so important these days, because people buy from people. They don't buy from a logo, really. And there's big brands like Nike, and my favorite brand is Jeep, because I have a Jeep and I love my Jeep and I'm a huge Jeep enthusiast. But it's the way the brand makes you feel. And if you're a small company, that feeling is going to come from you. It's never, ever, ever going to come from your logo, no matter how pretty it is. I'm not going to, I'm not going to be $1 billion company anytime soon. And people aren't going to recognize my brand all around the world, but my clients recognize my face. They know me. They know what they get from me. And my company name and logo becomes secondary to that. That's on the invoices. That's on, the billing that goes on my website. So I think that took me a while to realize how important that brand is, a personal brand is, to the company and to everything you do. You have to do both, you have to have your corporate brand and stuff like that, but don't discount or neglect your personal brand in any way. It's B2P, not B2C, not B2B. It's B2P, business to people.
I think sometimes that gets forgotten.
Yeah, or wants to get forgotten. Like I didn't want to be the I didn't want to have my face everywhere, because I think also, maybe for I don't know if it's just for women, but you feel like, you might be conceited, or you might be, like, who am I to, put my face everywhere and stuff like that. But you know what? Steve Jobs did it. I mean, everyone associates Apple with Steve Jobs. Even though, that's a whole other story, but they have both the Apple and Steve Jobs and front runners of their companies. They have their own personal brand as well. And if you sell your company, or you are in corporate America, what have you, and leave your job, your personal brand goes with you wherever you go. So it's important to nurture that and take care of it.
So do you recognize, or recommend rather, that for women in business, even whether they're in a corporate structure or small business, whatever, that in addition to what they're doing for their business, they also maintain or have that personal aspect of them so that should they leave, they would have something they would take with them besides
Yeah,
just a
absolutely.
resume?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you can create your personal brand just by starting a blog, starting to be, prolific on social media, the best way you can to talk about, your interests and so forth. I thought I was, had my personal brand just through LinkedIn, but I realized that I just like slapped my resume up there on LinkedIn. It really wasn't, I didn't really do much with it until recently. And I'm a huge proponent of LinkedIn marketing and finding business on LinkedIn. But you do have to you have to nurture that just like you would with any social media channel where you have to engage and understand what your audience wants and so forth to stay relevant.
Do you think people underestimate the power of doing that work on a platform such as LinkedIn?
Yeah, I do. I think there's, LinkedIn is not Facebook. It's really professional. So people go there to meet other professionals or people in business. So I think it's a huge opportunity for people to create their profile that tells a story beyond their resume. I revamp people's LinkedIn profiles and also their bios to tell stories rather than I did this and these are my words and bullet, bullet, bullet. It's really it really should come to life so people understand really what you're doing and how they can work with you
Well,
and
thank
that
you
sort of thing.
for teeing up my next question to you,
Oh,
because when I
sure.
was doing some background for you, there was something that you posted on LinkedIn. I spend a fair amount of time there. For that reason, I get to learn things and meet people that I really respect what they're doing in the world. And one of the things that in a post that you had up there was you wrote that stories that compel and gain trust are what we want to tell when we're talking about our business or ourselves, right? Stories that compel or gain trust. Can you talk about how that approach, what it means? So what would a story that does that look like or sound like, and how does that differ from what you typically see?
Well, again, so stories actually do something to our brain. So we're just geared to want to hear stories and not facts or features or benefits that are self-serving to the company and so forth. So if we did something for a client, tell us a story about that and engage them with dialogue or something that's relatable to them rather than just listing facts that they just kind of might overlook or not stop by and take a look. Like stop promoting like all this noise is promoting like look at me, but if you tell a story then you draw them in and make that relatable to them. Like, I don't know about you, but I've experienced this when I did that, or, let me tell you a story. It was a little embarrassing, but I think it might help you. You put it that you benefit onto anything that you do in marketing, it immediately draws people in and people have a more, genuine experience with you rather than always trying to sell something to them that they think they need, because people do not want to be sold to. Nobody wants to be sold because they always think they're better than the salesperson in a way. Like, I'm not going to let you trick me, haha, I know you're trying to do, haha. So you have to first find that emotional hook, and that emotional hook comes in with a story, then they're interested, and then the rational thinking comes in, like, oh wow, I like Joanne, this is great, I really need to do this for my business. And then like, but wait, do I trust her or not? And then then all those proof points would come in after they've had that like, yeah, I can relate to this moment, then they'll seek all that other credibility and so forth from you. So always tell stories. Don't always promote, add value whenever you can. And I find that adding value is through stories and
So
narrative.
that's on the topic of stories, kind of what I want to ask you to share with us next. So whenever I see somebody, and particularly women who have left one field and gone out on their own to do a startup, and so your business is fairly young,
Mm-hmm.
um, what was the story or the leap that you took to get from where you were? Because it sounds like you were kind of in corporate America with fairly consistent, solid
Mm-hmm.
work, to go into a, I will say, risky thing, new
Yeah,
startup,
yeah,
new
yeah,
business.
yeah.
Um, what was the motivating factor for that? And let's just start with that. What was the motivating factor for that?
Well, I did it at the companies that I worked for. So I just wanted to take that and do it for other companies as well. So I knew that there was a need out there for it. I mean, that's what any business is. Like, they solve problems for people, and this is your problem, here's how I solve it, is really, a good way to tell a story is too. So I took the risk, and I've been, swerving around a little bit, trying to get my business up and running, and to be consistent. But I thought, well, what the hell? If I don't try it now, when am I going to try it? I could always get a job. Let's see where this goes.
So, how did you prepare to do that? Did you save up a bunch to give yourself cushion? Did you start working or creating this business while you were still working full time? How did you think about that transition? Did you do it all on your own, or did you get help or mentors or?
Well, I just kind of threw myself into it, to be honest. I live in the lower part of Delaware, near the beaches. It's really lovely here. And there's no industry here. So if I wanted to stay here, I had to be on my own and do something for my own. So with that in mind, I sought out help through the SBA to find a business mentor. And for anyone listening, look up your local SBA or SCORE. Down here in Delaware, there's something called the Southern Delaware Business Center. And I was able to find a mentor. They signed me a mentor, and I went through my business plan. She asked me tough questions. So that's something that I recommend everybody do. It's not just for getting loans and so forth. It's because I didn't even try to get a loan. It's very tough to do that. But I just kind of threw myself into it, and that's all. That's really all I could do at that point. If I had to do it all over, I would have done that, and I would have gotten a coach. I think I didn't recognize the value that coaches have at that juncture when I first started out, because I was in that, I can do it. I got it. I don't need a coach. I'm a coach. Everyone's a coach. Who's gonna, you know what I mean? But no, not, you have to have that someone who's, not emotionally invested in your business like you are, to bring in advice and guidance and so forth. I mean, I was smart enough to network with other women in my area, and that was really helpful. But if you can get a coach, definitely try to find a coach.
It shortens the learning curve when you have a coach.
Yeah, because I totally agree. Maybe a coach wouldn't have told me to do this website that I got really stuck in, or along the way, you start, you have these days of real self-doubt, like, what the heck am I doing? Like, what did I get myself into? And it's really hard. You take you take your failures so much more personally and harder than I ever did in corporate America when I, was working, when I was a vice president, and, cause, the people that were above me were like, okay, it's all right, we're going to move on. And I would tell people, all right, we're going to move on. It's okay. But when you're in a business and you make a mistake like that, you just want to, you get really depressed about it. You could really crawl under a hole and stay there for a while. And, Ben and Jerry's is not going to save you. Anyone's like,
and then going back to you tried it. The Ben and Jerry's therapy didn't work for you.
I know it doesn't. I gained so much weight from this business. I'm not kidding. Like, what am I doing? Like, yeah, I broke up with Ben and Jerry too. I don't recommend.
See a website. See ice cream.
Yeah. I don't recommend that.
So we can laugh about that, but that really is, I don't think I've heard anybody say it quite as succinctly as you just did, is that the grace that we give other people when we're in business or when we're their coach or their whatever, the grace we allow others is harder to allow ourselves, especially when you're, to your point, you take it very personal. It is you and your brand, what you're doing.
Right.
So it's been, for me also, it's been an interesting thing to think, okay, how was that? And when people say, well, what did you think about that job you just did, right? And it's like 5 minutes after, I'm going, I have no idea. I need to wait and let it percolate and see how it feels. And I need to see the responses. Did the client or the folks that I served at that moment, did they benefit? And I don't know that right now because I was too busy working. So I think that's great. I liked how you're able to kind of encapsulate that. When you're in that space, since you broke up with Ben and Jerry's, what do you do to get out of it now? How do you, in a more healthy way, move beyond that stuck space?
I think for me, it's finding help, asking for help, get it, like I said, I started the podcast. That was still my passion project and so forth. Just getting out, talking with people, take stock in what you really love to do and do that for a while. So I'm in my career as a professional moderator, and the podcast is it's just like moderating. So I love that. And I found joy in that. I love to workshop. I just love workshopping. I just talk with like a marker in my hand. I'm doing it now. Like, where's the damn whiteboard?
She is. If you could see her, she's looking for flip chart and whiteboard right now.
I mean, that's just who I am. So I know I love that. So I started, I have classes scheduled at my local library. I'm going to teach like LinkedIn and Instagram classes and so forth. So, always have, so this way I have something that I'm looking forward to. I'm speaking at a breakfast, on Wednesday about charisma. And I just can't wait to talk about that. You wouldn't think I was an introvert, but I really am an introvert. And somewhere along the way, when we talk about self-doubt, and if you're an introvert, you just kind of automatically think you don't have charisma, or you think charisma might be like a hereditary trait, but it's not. It's so not. It's a skill. It's just like anything else. Like, it's a skill that you develop, and guess how you become terrific at that skill.
Is it practice?
Stories. Tell stories.
Oh, stories. Okay.
Tell stories. Use words. Words create endorphins in your brain. So make sure that you're using words to your advantage. So when you tell a story, you could say, so one of my shticks is, why did you move to Delaware? So I could say, well, it's such a lovely place. The people are nice. Or you could say, because I needed to avoid a jail sentence for manslaughter, and it was my only way out. And they were like, really? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, because if I stayed in New York 1 minute longer, I was going to kill someone. And go to jail. So you just kind of tell a story about, I have stories in my head about what it's like to ride the 7 train, and how you might come to think that you might kill someone in the 7 train, so it's stuff like that. So it's just having your stories for when people ask you certain questions in your back pocket. Like, what do you do? Why do you live in Delaware? Why do you live in Delaware? Why do you like dogs? Like, have those stories ready to go, which for introverts doesn't come very naturally, because we're always kind of not stuck for an answer, but they're like, that person doesn't want to hear the whole story, or, oh, it's fine, I'm doing great. How are you doing? Like, we always reflect and want to talk to them. But having those stories filled with words that create endorphins, like, I'm on an elevated train. Once you say train, your mind pictures the train, and then it creates endorphins. And that makes you more memorable, because we're all kind of endorphin junkies in a way. And that's, even on my business cards now, I say that I'm a daydreamer, chronic doodler, and chocolate aficionado. And, but I also write great content. So it's just like, let them picture the chocolate, because I know that's creating an endorphin.
I'm going to tell you that's extremely evil. Thank you very much. As a chocolate junkie, thank you very much. Chocolate and coffee, the two things I'm like going, oh man, I'm going to start craving them here in a minute. That is so hilarious to me. But I also will say that as you're talking, when you use words like the train, which is very concrete and you can picture it, but also the elevated, which is also a different thing. So you're using very visual words that imply action without making them verbs.
Right.
It's interesting. So that to me is very interesting. And I think anybody who sits on this side of a microphone, I would actually think they might be an introvert.
Yeah.
I do, because for me, it's the same thing, but I love being out and doing workshops and facilitating, because you get to help people. Right? It's still like having a microphone. It's just there's not one there.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
What is one of the most fun workshops you've done recently?
Well, I did an Instagram workshop recently, and I realized that I came in with I had an army, a mountain of information with me, and I didn't get to any of it because people just wanted to ask me questions they were so beginner that it was a good lesson that I didn't really get my audience before I went in there and workshop. So it was really fun to answer all those questions, but also fun for me to learn that I need to go back and rethink the workshop. Because actually we didn't get to the whole workshop part of it, where people would be creating posts and, thinking about their business. I had this whole setup, we're going to do 3 businesses. We're going to split into groups and we're going to workshop these things. But we didn't even get to that after 2 hours, because I was really just explaining the basics of Instagram for business. So, that was a fun workshop for me anyway, because I really felt like I made a difference in some of their lives.
Well, it sounds like they benefited as well.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, before we started recording, you made an interesting statement, and I would like for you just to talk a little bit more about that, if you would. And what you said was that you had a hope when you started your podcast. So I'd like you to describe what your podcast is, and then your hope for linking generations, which is my language about kind of where you shared with me. Because I love podcasting, so I want to know what's up with you and what your vision for yours is.
So my podcast just focuses on women business owners, and I really just let them share their story, like how they started up, what they thought. So, some things are similar to this conversation, and we usually focus on some kind of theme that might be beneficial. So my hope was that I would help people starting up just like I was, that had the deer and the headlights kind of thing, and not feel so alone. when because there's other women out there. And also, I think the crossing the generational divide, I've had some guests that one of my guests, when she was younger, she's I think she's in her 70s now. I mean, the only jobs that were available then were, housewife, which really, wasn't a job that you apply for, or secretary or nurse. And she's like, I want to get into business. How do I get into business? And I think it's easy for women and everyone to forget that how far behind we are really as women in a way. If our mothers and grandmothers didn't have those opportunities, we're always just kind of playing catch up. And I think we're doing a great job. I think there's a lot of opportunity for women who want to be in business or open their own business out there, but there's still, I think, only 3% of all the businesses out there are women owned. I don't have all the numbers in my head, but it's and those businesses, most are making less than $100,000 a year, compared to the private sector businesses, at least in the U.S., that are making $1 million or more a year. So there's a long way for us to come, but I really just started it for that, and I do think that women in my generation and older, I'm Gen X and baby boomers, need to come onto this podcast craze. I don't think they, I've had conversations with women like, well, what's a podcast exactly? And even one of my guests was like, well, what do I wear for a podcast? And I was like, wait, you did what? It's just we're just listening. It's not so clearly, like, they haven't really tapped into all the podcasts that are out there. It hasn't become part of their mainstay probably because they're not commuting to work and, just listening to a podcast. But I think, people are washing dishes and have their earphones in and listening to podcasts as a way to learn and grow. So I'd like to see, there are more men listeners than women for podcasts, and it's I don't know why, but I don't know why.
I don't either. Stats. I noticed my audience stats too. I'm thinking that's so interesting to me.
Yeah. So I don't know why, but I'd like to change. I definitely would like to change that.
Yeah, the whole earbud thing is the thing that is perfect, and I think for women, because we tend to be doing things all the time. Like when someone says, let's sit down and watch this, I'm thinking, are you kidding me? I'm not sitting down. It's the middle of the day. I have things I want to do. Or,
right.
Thinking, could we just listen?
Right.
Listen. People paint pictures with words. I don't need to actually see their picture.
Right.
So, which is why I loved your story. You had offered that you would be able to sit down, and I'm virtually sit down with people who might want to connect with you and understand more about their own profile on LinkedIn. Can you share what that, if I were to say, hey, Joanne, what would connecting with you in that way look like? Can you tell me what that offer is?
Well, it's, I'm running a LinkedIn workshop so people can update their profile. But basically, obviously I just do it in my local area, but just contact me and I'll ask you questions. And you can do this on your own if you don't talk to me or someone else. Is what's your story all about? Not so I recently changed up a profile for a neurotherapist, and I'm like, well, how did you get into it? What made you go into this field? It's so exciting. And she told me her whole story about her friend who had a stroke, and they used neurotherapy, and she was back to work in 2 weeks. And none of that was in her profile. None of that. She just had, I went to school here, I did this, I talked to this teacher, I did it was like really boring. So, but the woman had a stroke and she went back to work in 2 weeks. That's really powerful. Like, people would want to know more about you, want to know more about neurotherapy. She had her son played hockey and had a lot of injuries to his brain, and she did neurotherapy on him. And you could see on his brain maps how his brain kind of changed through that. So those are very powerful stories that you need to put into your profile. For my LinkedIn profile, it's kind of very quick. You don't have a lot of space in it, and it might not be as free-formed as like a bio that you would put in a proposal or anything like that. But it's like what I do, who I work with. Be ready to talk with me. Here's how it works. And if I had more space, I would be like, here's why it works, and testimonials and stuff like that. So all of it is to like get people moving and understanding you quickly and in an engaging way, rather than, I don't know, if you won an Emmy or an award or something like that, yeah, that's great. But tell us how you felt at that moment when you received the reward. That's more interesting and exciting. And what brought you to that point to receive the award? Like, who in your team do you want to, helped you along the way? Like, tell a good story. So talking that out with someone or me or someone really helps. And again, it's part of that personal branding journey that we all go on, where you're like, it's not, I don't want to show my face. I don't want to look conceited, or I don't want to, like, who am I? So talking to someone could really bring out all the great things about you to put either in your bio or your LinkedIn. And again, it's especially a bio that might go into a proposal or even a speaking opportunity. Make sure you tell the people what they're going to get from you. Like, it's all about you and or your client, I should say, or your audience, and not so much about all of the boring stuff that I've done in my life. Like, I'm going to make you a rock star on LinkedIn. They don't care if I'm a rock star on LinkedIn. They want to know, I'm going to make you do this, or I'm going to make your profile more interesting so you'll get more engagement. People will understand you better and connect with you more, because everybody has to go through that sales funnel, know, like, trust. And, if they get a little piece of you and find out what's in it for them, then you can move that along kind of quicker to that trust that's hard to get if you don't know somebody.
Joanne, thank you so much for being on the show. First of all, I love your energy. I love your irreverence at some points. And I'm really going to have to reflect on the story. I'm going to have to go back and really relook at all my LinkedIn stuff, plus the stuff I put in my proposal bios through a new lens. So I may be reaching out to get some coaching from you on that.
Great.
Yeah. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. I know my listening audience is going to love this podcast.
All right. Well, thank you, Sarah, for having me on. This is great work, and I love your show. So thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Well, that's it for this week's edition of the No Labels, No Limits podcast. We hope you liked what you heard, and if you did, we ask that you go over to iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever else you listen to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. If you know someone who would enjoy this podcast, please be sure to share. And until next time, have a great week living a no labels, no limits, and no excuses life.